You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
I think in resource-based filmmaking, like you said, there's people who will set films in their, meatpacking abandoned warehouse, or, like a lot of the mumblecore stuff from 10 years ago, New York apartment, pretty much the whole time. And, I think a lot of people poke fun at that, or, kind of look at it in a different way. But I actually think there's a lot of strength to being a good enough filmmaker to set something in one location, like you said, and keep it interesting. I think that might make you more talented than if you, have a film that puts you in outer space going to a different planet every 10 minutes or whatever.
Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Willis Podcast. Do you like this song? Has anyone seen the David Pumpkins skit yet? Because if you haven't, I'll link to it in the show notes. It's one of that weird skit things that SNL used to do, and it's hilarious. But hey, we won Potter and Family's Show of the Week competition. I want to say thank you to everyone that voted for us. Next week, Potter and Family will be giving us a ton of promotion, a ton of tweets. So I want to say thank you to Potter and Family for even hosting this competition. Thank you for everyone that voted for us. And I also want to give a shout out to our competitors, because we're up against 3 other podcasts. Number 1 was Man Points with an exclamation point podcast. They are at Taco Bell Picasso on Twitter. Just a Story Podcast at Just a Story Pod on Twitter, and the 5cast at the number 5cast on Twitter. So thank you guys. They all have stellar podcasts. So we were able to just pull this out because because of the fan base, right? But I want to say again, thank you for everyone who voted for us. It really is appreciated. Excuse me. I also wrote an article about team building for Jason Brubaker's site, Filmmaking Stuff. Whenever it's out, I'll make sure to tweet about that. Jason is a great guy. He's been on the show about 3 times, and he asked me to write this article, which I gladly did. And it kind of ties in, actually ties in a lot with our next guest, because our next guest, we talk a lot about team building and how do you find those reliable people? How do you find people that you can collaborate with? And we also talk a lot about resource-based filmmaking, aka the Rodriguez lists. Because you shouldn't make, if you're going to make a film, I'm not talking about a student film, if you're going to make a film nowadays, and you don't have a bunch of money in the bank, you're not going to be able to find some VC who's just going to, money drop $1 million in your bank account. What you should do is, use what resources you have to make a film. Don't make a colossal space movie or some action movie like a la John Woo. It's just going to end up blowing up in your face. And take it from personal experience. It has blown up in my face before when I've tried to just shoot for the moon, and you end up with a half-done movie that the effects don't look good enough. A movie that comes to mind is Primer. If you've ever seen Primer, it's a whole movie about time travel, and the guy shot it, Shane Carruth, shot it for like $7,000, and it's very well done. It's a very cerebral movie, but it just shows what you can do with the right resources and the right script. But speaking of the right resources and the right script, my next guest, we're going to be talking about just that. We're going to be talking about all of this stuff, and it is a phenomenal conversation. And, his movie Son of Clowns will be released November 15th, 2016 on VOD. That's Son of Clowns, and I'll link that in the show notes. This is episode 133 with guest Evan Kidd.
You're listening to the Dave Willis Podcast.
Hey, Evan, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Hey, my pleasure, Evan. It's a question I always ask everybody. It's a question I just always begin every interview with, and that question is, Evan, what got you started in the film industry?
think just a love of the craft of cinema. It's that simple for me. Is other filmmakers have said this before, but I'm really no different. Like, I grew up around it. We watched a lot of movies in my house growing up, and it was kind of the default. If something wasn't going on, parents would put on a movie, we'd watch it, and I just kind of grew up in that culture. Ended up stealing my dad's VHS camera a lot of times when I was like 3 and 4 years old, and I would, shoot stuff around the house and the pets and, stuff around the neighborhood. So it kind of just grew really naturally. And then when I went, into high school, there was like this little, film the morning announcements class, which was really cut and dry, but it gave you access to, tripods and editing software and stuff like that. So I would kind of use that after hours and do what I wanted. And I thought that was cool. And then that was around the time YouTube was really taking off. And so, I think all those things kind of gelled together to propel me into, pursuing it once I got to college. And kind of from there, it's been history. So it's, been pretty natural, but I think it's also been a direct correlation to how, over the years, technology has really allowed more people into the film business. I've never had a huge inkling to just go and direct, Avengers 5 or whatever. For me, it's always just been about telling a compelling story with, resources around me, whether that be, cast and crew or just, the technology that, so many of us have access to.
Yeah, very true. And I remember those big VHS cameras.
Yeah.
See, you and I are kind of sort of around the same age. I mean, but and sometimes some of my guests are a little bit older than I am, so they didn't have that. They had this like the Super 8.
Yeah.
That's what they remember when they were a kid,
Mm-hmm.
And guys like us, we had the those big old that looks like a big boom box you put on your shoulder. You couldn't use it for more than 5 minutes, or you'd kill your back and your neck, and it would look like a bazooka. And and then now they went to mini DV. But yeah, I remember when YouTube first was taking off in like 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
And I remember just being blown away. And I remember people were just putting up different stuff, and it was still on the nobody really talked about it until a few years later, and then all of a sudden it was like this freaking juggernaut.
Exactly. I mean, I remember when it first, launched off, I was like, we can put online video on the internet. And, at that time, my parents, believe it or not, still had dial-up. So that concept was, in like 2004, super foreign to me. And so, I would only watch YouTube literally at school, and we weren't even supposed to do that. So, for me, it was like technology was just slowly emerging out of the shell. And then, give it a few months, most everyone, including my family, got DSL and faster internet, and everything kind of started catching up to what you could do. And for me, that was extremely exciting. And I remember thinking I could just make a movie and put it on YouTube. Like, holy shit, that's crazy. Like, and for me, that didn't even seem within the realm of possibility. But like I was saying, given a little bit of technology, I think that's half the reason I'm able to do what I do, and so many others.
Yeah, totally agree. And, I actually want to get into that too, about, making your film, Son of Clowns,
Yeah.
and, working with all the resources you have around you. But I wanted to ask really quickly, did you go to film school?
I did. Yeah, I went to East Carolina University a couple years ago. I graduated from that in Greenville, North Carolina. And it was a great program. I really enjoyed it. Definitely taught me a lot. I think it was a lot more of a technical program in terms of how to operate a camera, cut your own stuff like that, than it was truly trying to craft, screenplays and all that. There was screenwriting classes, but I kind of think it geared more to that. So I did a lot of learning on my own in terms of, the story structure and all that. Like, it was definitely there, but I think if you really, really wanted to get the full, breadth of it, I would talk to my professors, and they'd be like, here's this resource. You got to look at it on your own hours, just because it wasn't built into every part of the curriculum. But I would definitely recommend it. It was a great program and really cut my teeth there for sure. Met a lot of the people who would end up helping me make Son of Clowns and other films like that. But yeah, I definitely think that is, important. And at the very least, it gave me the know-how, because I also do a lot of documentary work. And so a lot of times in those situations, I don't have as big of a crew as I would, on my narrative stuff. And like, I was shooting something last month, and I was literally the only crew member. And it was kind of by design. Like, if I really dug around, I could have, probably got a camera operator, sound designer, stuff like that. But it was just such a, sporadic opportunity. I didn't have time. And so in those occasions, I'm really glad I went to film school, because otherwise I don't know if I'd know how to operate a camera, run sound, kind of do all those technical things. So.
Yeah, that's a question I usually ask. Certain people have come on and they said, Dave, film school was a waste of time. Some people have come on and said, hey, film school was phenomenal to me.
Sure.
And, and it's something I always go back to because, our experiences, perception equals reality. And, if your perception of something is, skewed, or something, his perception of something is, hey, listen, my experience was terrible, and my perception of it was totally worthless. I just ask people to be honest. You know what I mean? And I always like hearing people's different experiences. I know my listeners like hearing different people's experiences about this stuff, because I think that's critical. You know what I mean? And it's sort of something you've touched on with what you just said is also something critical, and that is building a team. And I always ask people, how did you build your team? Where did you guys meet? And you met your whole team through film school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of them. I did meet a lot of them, a couple of folks after the fact, but I think it was that network that really makes film school invaluable. I've heard a lot of people say you don't need film school. I've heard a lot of people say, oh yeah, you got to do it or else you're screwed. I kind of fall in the middle of the road thinking, obviously I'm a product of a film school and I went to one, but at the same time, it was a film school that I think really kind of forced me to do a lot of outside learning outside of the program. So I think I kind of got a good breadth of, a lot of different options. Like I said, there's this story I always tell. I made this documentary called Spaz Out a couple years ago. And the project was, out of this documentary class I was taking in undergrad. And basically you had to make this 10-minute documentary over the course of about 2 months. And it was the story, I was telling was about this underground punk DIY music scene. And there was, doing shows out of this warehouse. It was super illegal, but there was a lot of, heart in the, people trying to make music happen. And to me, it felt like a bigger story. So I, wanted to make something longer. And I remember talking to my professor and he was like, why do you want to make it a bigger story? And I was like, just because I feel like that's the best way to tell it. And he was like, if that's your reason, then go for it. And, I think that has stayed with me because a lot of times I want to make projects that maybe aren't originally thought of or aren't originally, in the, quote unquote guidelines of something. And I think film school is a, great launching pad. So, I guess I got a little off track, but I would say, coming back around, I think it really depends for each person. Like if you are going to go into extreme debt and, it might kind of mess up your trajectory for the next couple of years and you're pretty self-taught, you watch YouTube videos and stuff like that, you may not need that kind of technical guidance. But, again, if you want the resources and the crew base and the, internships and stuff like that, you're not going to get that through a YouTube tutorial. So I think it really is kind of something each person needs to weigh individually.
Yeah, that's very true. A friend of mine, he went to I think went to NYU, and Martin Scorsese comes in to talk to a class like once a semester or whatever. And when he walked in, he was like, "Holy shit!" Martin Scorsese just walked in the room and was like, "Hey, everybody, want to talk about film?" And it's like, who's gonna say no? First off,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what I mean. But it's that's the benefit he got from going to NYU, or and if you go to USC, I think Steven Spielberg comes in like once a semester as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's invaluable. I mean, if you're able to get that, how do you pass it up? Like you said.
Yeah. And but it's that's something I want to talk about too, is building your team, and using those resources around you to actually make your film. And I want to ask about building your team. So Evan, when you were building your team, I don't, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but I don't know if anybody really goes out with that mindset of, hey, you know what, I'm going to go today look for a team that I could put together. I think it sort of happens naturally, it happens organically. And eventually, something clicks in your mind where you go, hey, I could work with this person as a producer. You know what I mean? And I think, that's how people sort of build teams, as I found doing this podcast and even my own experiences in making stuff. So, what are some of the qualities, Evan, that you find with your team that when you were sort of putting them together, when you put that team together to make Son of Clowns?
Your team is your backbone, and you are pretty much as made as your team is made, I guess I would say. And so, it's like a sports team. You're the coach, but you want to pick your players. And when you're making something like the way we made my feature film, Son of Clowns, for example, that was the biggest crew I've ever, had the opportunity to work with up to this point. And, certain days were better than others. Certain days we'd have very small crew, like 6-7 people. Other days we'd have a bigger crew, a lot of PAs, probably 15, 20. And so most everyone in that crew worked for free. No one made money. And that's the thing that's tricky, because when you're in micro budget cinema, like no one cares. Before I made the film, no one cared if I made Son of Clowns. I was the only person that cared, the actors and the crew, but no one else cares. And that's the kind of rough truth that you need to get around, is that, you know, when you're making your micro budget, no one cares. And once you kind of accept that, and once you say, okay, people will care once we make it, but like up until this point, you don't have investors, you're really bankrolling on your own credit card, which is what I did. Basically, my mentality was find people who want to work, because at that time the North Carolina film incentives just crashed because of some stupid politics, and so a lot of people were out of jobs and a lot of people were kind of sitting around anyway. So I was like, well, instead of sitting around, let's all do something. You know, I took a hit from that, and a lot of other people did, because by day I do a lot of crew work, you know, AC stuff like that. And so, you know, for me, it was kind of a situation where let's make the best out of, you know, something that sucks. And then, you know, I would say on the second thing, when you find crew that are passionate, grab those people, because those are the people you want with you on the battlefield, so to speak. Those people will, you know, stay the extra hour. Those people won't mind if you do lunch an hour or two late. You know, those people really just want to get your story. And I'm a big believer in, you know, quote unquote working for free. Yeah, no one got paid. I definitely didn't get paid. I went to the red, but you know, it was my movie, so I totally understand that. But every other aspect of this production, I said, let me not make it so it costs people money. Okay, so let me fill up their gas tanks. Let me get all their meals covered. You know, let me give them something great for their reel. Let me actually publicize this film, because I think the thing that happens and why a lot of people are hesitant to do free work is because they've been burned in the past, and I've had it happen to me. When you know, work on something for free, I think a lot of times there's this kind of, you know, hesitant notion, which I totally understand. Like I do a lot of crew work for a living. That's how I make a lot of, you know, my money. And for me, like I will work on a free project, but I have to know where it's going. Will it be sent out to festivals? Because the last thing anyone wants is to work on a film and just have it get thrown up on YouTube, get about 100 views, and then no one cares. You know, people want to know they're a part of a project that's going to at least try to go somewhere. Like everyone knows it's not guaranteed, but at the very end of the day, there has to be some effort being made. So I tried to be as transparent about that possible with, you know, the whole cast and crew. You know, I sent them emails for months and months after the fact. You know, we got into this film festival. We're going to submit here. You know, stuff like that. You know, give everyone their footage promptly so they can put it on a reel. That, you know, that kind of thing. Just be a decent person. You know, if you can't pay people, try to, you know, make all the rest of the filmmakers who don't have a lot of money look good.
Yeah, and you know that's something I agree with too. Is I think people have been burned in the past by free work, and it's sort of, you know, maybe they've worked for free for, you know, a person, and it's never been reciprocated.
Exactly.
So they kind of say, you know, I you know, now I'm in the hole now, so to speak. And you know, I got into a friend of mine actually teaches, you know, film at a high school, and he and I got into this whole thing before because we were talking about free work, and you know, some people say do it, some people say don't do it, and basically the thing that we have a problem with was when I was making my student films, I said, you know, I need some help, and some people offered to work for free. Mm-hmm. Well, they would come on, and then they would sort of act like they don't need to be professional, or act like they need to actually do their job the right way because, hey, you're not paying me anything, so what the hell's the difference?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the reason a lot of these people have bad experiences, is because there's a lack of professionality on some free sets. I'm not going to say all, but you know, the way I coordinated my set, I would say, and a lot of people told me it ran very professionally, and a lot of people said they were shocked. You know, both, you know, day players who just had, you know, one scene, they would just come in and out, and, you know, people who were there for the long haul too. A lot of people said that. And you know, I guess I could take it as a compliment, but for me, I want that to be the bar. Like, I don't want, I don't want that to be the exception to the rule, you know?
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. You always make sure your set's running good. But again, that's having that team, right? You know, making sure you have a producer who, you know, and if that person's going to be the producer, you know, do you have a UPM? You know, do you, you know, have a location manager? Do you have, you know, a solid first AD? You know, do you have a solid cinematographer? Right. Usually, what you know, what I've come across is when someone's going to make a project and they have people work for free, usually there's one sexy selling point. And what I mean by that is usually they have some amazing location they can use, or, you know, some kind of, you know, for instance, I had a friend of mine make a film and he ended up having a world-class cinematographer on there. And that was a selling point, going, look, you know, the film's going to look good. And, you know, because we have this cinematographer, and people were actually more interested in enjoying the project because they said, hey, if this person's a part of it, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
then it's going to be good.
Definitely. I would say, for us, maybe it's kind of half a miracle that we pulled it off. I never had an AD for any of these days. So, I lost my voice so much just because I was doing double duty, with the directing. And especially there's a scene in here where we had like 40 extras and majority of them were, kids under the age of 8. So, like I said, trying to get that many people it was a party scene. So there was, noise and a whole bunch of stuff. Coordinated is very difficult. But I'm a firm believer if, you put something to mind, it truly can happen, as corny as it sounds. Would I do it that way again if I had a choice? No. But, I think a lot of times in micro budget cinema, you just got to treat it like it's almost its own separate thing from normal filmmaking because, I say that not as a slight to it, but, when you get put in these situations, like, for example, another thing that happened during filming, our sound guy got sick on the third day. And, thanks to going to ECU, I knew how to run a boom. None of our PAs had touched it. And I was like, okay, it was our shortest day. I'm going to have to run this boom. And I was not excited about it, but it was like everyone came out. We had this restaurant cleared out, and it was the only day we were going to be able to get in this restaurant. And if we didn't shoot, we're going to lose the location, and, we wasted a whole bunch of people's time and blah, blah, blah. So, it's really just rolling with the punches, and, we pulled it off. I made it work. Would I choose to do that? No. But I think when you do work in micro budget, you just kind of have to be flexible and, definitely, if anyone has ego, check that shit at the door because that does not even fly. Like, had I been on a normal set, there would be no way in hell I would touch a boom pole. But in a situation like that where you're making your movie, for me, this was like one of the most personal stories I've ever told, in a lot of ways. And so, for me, I just wanted to get the thing made. And so I knew, okay, I got to bite the bullet, do this. And I just kind of rolled the punches.
Yeah, ego is something that is very dangerous, and I've been a part of some projects, man, where some people's egos were so unbelievable,
Yeah.
and I'm usually sort of the bad cop. Like I'll be the guy, and I don't mean I don't just you don't fight fire with fire right away. I just sort of take them aside and say, hey, guy, maybe we should just tone this down.
Definitely.
I think some people, and I've met some people who are just. I don't know where they get their ego from. It's almost like somebody when they were younger told them that they were so special and so talented and everybody else can just go fuck themselves. Mm-hmm. And then and then they come to these film sets and it's like, hey, I'm here. Let me, real quick little funny story. I went to a friend of mine's film set and it was a horror movie. It was a slasher film. And there was this PA that was walking around who thought that he was God's gift to film and thought he was so thought he was so misused by being a PA. And I said, hey, what's this guy's deal? I went to shake his hand. He just kind of looked at me and I was like, what the fuck? And later on, somebody said, oh yeah, he doesn't want to be a PA. And the director knows he's got an ego problem and just made him a PA, sort of like a punishment type deal.
Okay.
And yeah, it was just, I said, why don't you just fire the guy?
Yeah.
Why even have, I'd rather have nobody and just put, tape on the floor and say, hey, come in here this way. This way's the craft. This way's the set.
Yeah.
This way's the green room.
Yeah.
So it's like, why, that ego just, man, it just, I've encountered that before and it really is so toxic because it starts to spread to other people too.
Yeah. When I got out of film school, I worked on Shark Tank for a little bit and, I was a camera PA and I kind of worked my way up a little bit in that world. It's not really a world I love hanging out in a lot, reality, but I've done a lot of it. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I do see actually, believe it or not, a lot of ego in reality TV. And this is on the crew side, not in all shows. And actually Shark Tank is not my example. They were actually very lovely, but I worked on some other shows after that. And, I saw a lot of these like reality directors, man, they like thought they were God's gift to earth. And I'm just like, man, you're directing like a fake fight between people on like a TLC show. Like what? Like, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you're going to get what you kind of deserve gossip wise, I guess, by your crew if you're acting, just like an idiot and like, telling people, oh, you don't know who I am. I did this pilot of this. I'm just like, well, half this stuff I've not even heard of. And that's kind of my problem. It's like, I don't like pretentiousness on any level, but if you're going to like, if, and I'm sure he's a wonderful guy, but if Scorsese was a little pretentious to me, I guess I could take it because he's Scorsese. But it's like if some of these other people do it, I kind of have a little question mark over my head, and I kind of look at that a little weird. So for me, I just try to not be pretentious and not act like an idiot. Treat people with respect. I've been there. I've been the PA. I know kind of how much, it sucks and how a lot of times people take advantage of you. So, with this film, I tried to tell my PAs, I don't want you to just grab coffee. Like, I want you to tell me what you want to do, and we'll put you near that department. Or if you have questions, between takes, feel free, like, you can talk to me. Like, I don't want to ever appear or seem unapproachable. So that's kind of my mindset.
Yeah, we can understand if Scorsese's pretentious. I had one time I was on a film set, and one of the guys was arguing with another guy, and he says, "Do you know who I am? I won the South blah 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 film festival." No one's ever heard of this fucking film festival, and the fact that he won it with some movie called I think it was called like Dirtbag or Sleazebag or something, and he screened it one time, and I was like, this movie won a film festival. I said, what was there, two entries? And but like when he said that, everyone just kind of laughed. And it's just like, there's two options. Either just ignore that guy, or people start to fuck with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, my dad always had a saying when I was a kid, when I, acted out or whatever. And he'd always be like, if I could roll the tape back on that and show you, you'd really see how much of an idiot you were. And I I apply that to anyone else I meet, because I think a lot of times in the heat of the moment, people say stupid stuff. But, if we were to roll the tape back, so to speak, on everyone, I think a lot of people would admit, wow, I'm coming across like a douchebag.
Yeah, I that's why it is so important about building that team, to just make sure, all those egos or toxic people or people who are going to try to, take over the project. I had one time, I had some people message me, and I wasn't even a part of the project, and they were working with a friend of mine, and they said, "Dave, can you go talk to him? Because he's listening to this one guy who started off as nothing. He was just like a consultant, and now all of a sudden he's a producer, and he's going and telling us he's trying to micromanage everybody." And they said, this started off as a fun little project, and now this guy's like ruining everything. Can you go talk to him? To my friend who was in charge, and I said, I don't think I can go down that path, because you know what I mean? Because he likes that guy so much. It's like you got to pick and choose your battles of what to win.
Oh, absolutely. And going back to what you said about the team, I mean, that's the most important aspect, both in life and in filmmaking, is just surround yourself with good people.
Yes. Very true. Get all those negative people, those hateful, passive aggressive people. And, I just read an article on Twitter the other day about how like this snarky attitude that some people have, like, oh yeah, that's real fucking cool. That attitude, you have to get, that's even toxic to yourself. You know what I mean? And so what happens is, if you have those people on set, we're like, oh great, we're doing another indie film, get those people out. I don't care what they've done in the past, how talented they are, just ask them very politely to leave, and just try to, say, hey, listen, thanks, but no thanks.
Well, isn't that the worst kind of person? Someone who complains about the environment in which they're a very part of. It's like, if you're so wonderful, why are you here? It's like, I always find that, kind of gross. And, anytime I see that, I just kind of have to roll my eyes a little bit. I mean, there's definitely a culture, with certain people who think, they're better than this, or they don't have to do this, or, but, at the end of the day, it's like, if you feel that way, why did you show up in the first place?
Yeah, it's really odd, and I think it is an ego thing. They just want to make themselves feel heard and seen. Like, you know what? I could have been in my apartment today, but instead I'm going to be out here on this film set telling you how great I am.
Yeah, and it's like, I could be in my underpants watching Netflix, but I decided to grace you with my presence. So it's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I refuse to watch Cinema Sins and trailer, whatever that's called, the truth of the trailer, or honest trailers. That's it. And those two things, because it's just like the snarky nitpicking type of deal, and you could tell that both the people who run them, I guarantee you, want to be filmmakers, and they just are too frustrated or can't do it, so they just have to make this thing where they insult other people's work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know personally for them, but I mean, I know there are people that way, definitely. And, I think it's unfortunate because, again, not to, prod the fire or whatever, but, nowadays it's easier than ever to be a filmmaker. So it's like, if you're still ragging on people, it's like, damn, what's your excuse? Like,
And you know what's funny, Evan? I have friends who I've known who are like that. I'll enter I'll post what I'm doing on social media. Like, hey, I'm entering this contest. This guy sent me an email, and it was just this attitude, like, oh man, I wish I don't have the time anymore, blah blah blah, and this and that. I'm like, dude, write a page a day or something. I don't know, or write something. I mean, why are you coming at me? You know what I mean?
So he was hitting you up for advice, or he was just saying like, I'm tired of seeing you talk about stuff.
It was more like a backhanded compliment sandwich.
Gotcha.
It was like, hey, good to see you doing stuff, blah blah, and then here comes the passive aggressiveness, and then he finishes up with like another compliment. So it's kind of like, I don't know how to take this sandwich, but
yeah, no, I've gotten a couple of those over the years, and I mean, I think it's just like when you're doing something good or well, or maybe not even good or well, just in general, just being active and not sitting on your couch. Some people take offense to that, or some people wish they were doing that. And, I mean, again, everyone has their own situation. I'm not going to pretend I know why, some people can't make a film every year or whatever. But, to those of us who are attempting to do that, I really don't think, the way to do it is, backhanded compliments. I mean, if you're interested in truly doing that for yourself, ask, how did you do it? Ask, how can I help you? Ask, can you help me? I think there's a more productive way to have that conversation.
And you know what? I want to have that conversation right now, Evan. I want to ask how you did it, because it was Son of Clowns. So let me just guess with what you did, and maybe you can correct me. Maybe I'm wrong, but you sat down and I think you made an asset list of what you had access to, and you sort of built the script around that, and you already had your team in place, and you sort of. You showed your team, hey, I wrote this script, Son of Clowns. What do you think? They maybe gave you some feedback, and, maybe went through a few drafts, and then you said, you know what, I think it's ready to make this thing. And you got that asset list. You knew you had access to that stuff, and you were able to sort of put together, a shooting schedule, and you put everyone's schedules together, of all the actors, and you got yourself a cinematographer, or who's already a part of your team, or you did it yourself, and you were able to, within one degree or another, pretty much shoot the script that you wrote because you sort of wrote it from the inside out. Am I right or wrong?
That's pretty accurate to how the dominoes fell. Yeah, I mean, pretty much that's what I did. I started this project completely alone. A couple months after I got out of film school, I was like, okay, I want to write something. I was kind of schlepping it out on those reality shows, coming home at night, kind of wishing I could do something a little more artistic. So I started writing, and it took about a year-ish. And at that point, I was finishing some promotion, film festival, circuit touring for my last short, Displacement Welcomed, which was my thesis film from film school at East Carolina. And during one of those kind of interview situations, I met this guy named Bradley Bethel. And he was a writer, but he also expressed an interest in wanting to make movies and produce. And he was in the middle of making a documentary, and he, had a lot of success with that. And he was saying he was interested in kind of shifting into producing narrative film as well. So once I met him, it was kind of a combination of my network and his network. So I met my cinematographer through him. He met his assistant producer through me. So, we kind of shifted and traded around people we both knew until we had this amalgamation of a whole bunch of people. And then kind of going back to what you said about, making a list of assets and things I had access to. Absolutely. Because, when you're making a micro budget film, you really don't have the luxury of just like pointing to a place on the street and saying, we're going to buy that place out for a day and stick our cameras in there. Because that's not how it works when you're doing this. We found these locations weeks and months in advance, and said, hey, what is a time when you're either doing little to no business or you're closed, so that way we don't have to shut you down and take your guys's cash flow out for a couple hours or whatever, make it as easy for you guys as possible. And you'd be surprised if you kind of phrase it that way, what a lot of people will be willing to do. We kind of explain to them, we will promote this film heavily, or, stuff will be seen. But, I think more than that, like, that's kind of promises that, people have heard before. I think if you're just transparent and honest and you just say, look, we don't want to cost you money. Cause like, if you're a bar owner, right? So we filmed in several bars. If you're a bar owner and Evan Kidd just randomly shoots you an email, you don't know me from Adam. You open your email and you just see, hey, we have this indie film. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Let's film here. Please, please, blah, blah, blah. You're going to be like, okay, so is this going to cost me money? Am I going to be out? And you just have to speak their language, essentially. They don't care that you're making this personal film and blah, blah, blah. All they care about is, okay, I want to help you out, but, let's not cost me a lot of money. So that's kind of the situation we framed within.
So the reason I was able to sort of gauge that, Evan, is because, I've done this myself.
Yeah.
And lately I've been that's been my, for podcast listeners, they know that for every time I introduce a show now, I've been talking about this, making, how do you make a film? How do you make a film with what you have access to right now? And, some people call it the Rodriguez list. I actually had Robert Rodriguez as a producer on here.
Oh, cool.
And he and even I were talking about that because he's like, yeah, Dave, you pretty much got it. That's exactly what he did. And so, if you have access, let's just say, for instance, I had friends of mine, they had access to an old abandoned meatpacking plant. And they had the key and they were able to film there.
Mm-hmm.
And, that became the location, okay, we're going to set the entire film in this abandoned meatpacking plant. Well, what happens in there? Well, obviously it's a horror film because you're not going to set a comedy in there. So it's now, it's a slasher film. Okay. And they're stuck in there. All right. And, one thing leads to another and they sort of, go from there. And, that's sort of how they built the script, and I think that's how, and I also noticed this too, Evan. I think this is sort of becoming the calling card / hallmark of our time, where this is a sort of definition of talent. Can a person or filmmaker make a film in one location and keep it interesting? You know what I mean? Can a person, make a movie with, the Rodriguez list and keep it interesting? And I sort of think this is sort of the benchmark now where we're serious filmmakers and people who just sit around and say, hey, listen, I have an idea for a film. I don't know what to do. And I'm just going to wait until somebody gives me $10 million.
Exactly. You mentioned Rodriguez. I mean, him and Linklater and filmmakers like that. I mean, that's who I kind of idolize and, watched growing up in high school and going through film school. And, those are kind of the mindsets I like to kind of, put myself in if possible. Because, working with a million producers and investors and Hollywood's money and, or some, rich guy's money or whatever, that would be fantastic. I'm not going to lie. But, at the same time, I think resource-based filmmaking will get you a story that you're not going to get if you make a film that way, if you kind of do it quote unquote by the book. I think in resource-based filmmaking, like you said, there's people who will set films in their, meatpacking abandoned warehouse or, like a lot of the mumblecore stuff from, 10 years ago, New York apartment, pretty much the whole time. And, I think a lot of people poke fun at that or, kind of look at it in a different way. But, I actually think there's a lot of strength to being a good enough filmmaker to set something in one location, like you said, and keep it interesting. I think that might make you more talented than if you, have a film that puts you in outer space going to a different planet every 10 minutes or whatever. Nothing wrong with that, but I just think that's more interesting to me. And, a lot of times filmmaking is like solving a puzzle. So, for me, I like that. I like that challenge. And for Son of Clowns, we probably made it harder on ourselves than we needed to, just because we did have so many locations. And a lot of times, characters would rove around throughout the triangle in North Carolina. That's the region the film is set. And, we probably didn't need to make it as in-depth as we did, but we kind of wanted the film to have a slice of Raleigh, North Carolina, So we kind of wanted to incorporate a lot of different locations to give, people who knew the area a little taste of it. And so, if we were to do it a different way, like, I'm writing a new feature right now, and it's a little bit more of a psychological film, a little bit more introspective, a little darker. And I think, that film is probably going to be a little bit more similar to that, where, there will be not as many locations. So it's going to rely a lot on, character development. Not that Son of Clowns doesn't. There's a lot of character development, but I think just in terms of getting a new location to kind of refresh your the ADD of the audience, so to speak. You may not get that, so I think that is interesting, definitely, and kind of being able to tell that and convey that in a compelling way is a mark of strength.
Yeah, and also this is something I've talked about before, which is if you were to live, let's just say, I live in Philadelphia, you're in North Carolina, correct?
Yeah, by way of Louisiana at the moment. I'm working on a project, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, where we live, people sort of aren't burned out yet from being asked, if you go to LA and say, hey, listen, can I shoot here?
Yeah.
They're going to say, look, buddy, you're the third person today who's asked us about that. And the answer is going to be no.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, I was in Los Angeles last month for a film festival for Son of Clowns. And it was kind of, I'd been there before briefly during a layover, but, I was there for 3 days this time and kind of got my feet wet, so to speak, in LA. And, I was talking to some folks at the festival, and they were just telling me all the same things. And they were like the locals, and they were just saying, independent film is super tricky if you live in Los Angeles. Like, they were saying it's almost harder over there just because, people know, and it's such a part of the culture, and Hollywood is king over there. So you have a little bit of resistance. I mean, you can obviously shoot something in your backyard or your apartment or whatever, but like if you're, like you said, trying to get into bars and stuff, you may as well forget it unless you've got a lot of money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just, even a friend of mine who actually found a little independent spot, every time he shot there, they would raise the fee up.
Yeah.
They kept raising the fee up a little bit more. And finally he, by the fifth or sixth time, he said, my God, it's it's like a little, this little coffee shop. They charge us like, I think $200. Now he's like, they're charging us over $1,000. And he said, it just doesn't make any fiscal sense anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean, if we were to film Son of Clowns in that coffee shop for 2 days, we would have gone over our whole budget for the film. I mean, that's the short of it. But, I definitely think, if you want to be an independent filmmaker, I would advise anyone to find a city that's big enough to have crew base and, film schools around it. So, maybe not the middle of Idaho. Although you could maybe challenge yourself to do something out there. I don't know. But if you find one of these kind of regional big cities, I think you can really set yourself up for success. Because I had a lot of friends who, after ECU and film school, moved to Los Angeles. And, several of them are doing pretty good for themselves. But, a couple others are really struggling. And, it's everyone knows it's hard out there. But, a lot of them have not made their own work since film school. And I think that's just kind of hard because once you're in that system, you kind of need to, be a cog, not as an insult, I'm not saying this, but you kind of have to do that first before you're allowed permission. And I think anywhere else, that's there, but you kind of get a little more leeway to say, okay, wait, back up. I want to make my own story. How do we do this?
Yeah, and I've heard that same type of experience too. Is some people do kind of well out there. A friend of mine ended up crewing on different stuff. Then he went to Louisiana now, where he he's working on crew project. He's working on tons of projects and crew. And other friends, I had one friend who went out there. He had contacts out the ass, and you know what happened, Evan? He felt very lonely and isolated out there. And he said, basically, everyone's always busy, everyone's always working. And he just felt, basically his only people he could talk to was the people at like a Chinese restaurant or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, because he would order from them every day. He'd go down there and they would know who he was. And he'd say, oh, yeah, it's me, Mm-hmm. He hated it. And he ended up moving back. And funny little story, Evan, he still hasn't made a movie himself. And, he and I talked before about, I said, what, because he asked me, he's like, Dave, seriously, we went out to dinner and he said, Dave, what is holding me back? And I said, your fear of failure is holding you back. Because if you think that you make this movie and it sucks, it's going to mean you have no talent and it's going to be indicative of everything that you've spent your whole life doing.
Yeah.
And that's what's stopping you.
Yeah. I mean, fear is, there's a book I've read. I think Robert Rodriguez mentioned in an interview a whole bunch of years back, and it's called The Art of Fear. And it's a book that basically categorizes every doubt, every little inkling of, why we shouldn't do an artistic endeavor into a category and kind of lets you filter through it so you can catch those thoughts before they come out. It's a great read. It costs like $8 on Amazon. I would totally recommend it. But, I would say it's not just that book, because I made this film before I read that book, but I think it's just a mindset, and I hate just the little Nike just do it, but it's so true. Like, there's no one way that you're going to be successful. There's no one way that you're going to make this, feature, short, or whatever. But, if you try, you can at least say you tried. Because, isn't that the worst thing, to go to bed at the end of the day and kind of mull over in your head, man, I still haven't taken the jump? Because at the very least, if you take the jump and it's a horrible failure, who's really going to care? Like, maybe a few of your friends will be like, oh, yeah, he tried to make a movie. But, like, I guarantee you a few of your friends have much bigger problems than, trivializing over your movie. So, at the end of the day, it's really you that has to deal with it. So, if you can kind of make peace in your own mind, I think that's the key.
Yeah, there's also a great book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Oh, I've got that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. You know what? I read that book, and I very rarely ever just put down a book, that's not fiction, and say, holy crap, I got to read that again right now. Literally, I sat down to read it at a Barnes and Nobles. I read the whole thing, and I was like, I'm going to go buy this. I have to buy it. This is like my new go-to thing. And everything he talks about, I was like, that's me. This is, you sit down to write, and in one ear you're hearing, sort of like, your muse, and in the other ear is resistance,
Yes.
whispering in your ear, oh, you have no talent. Don't do this. It's stupid. You're awful. Just forget about this and go go sell, snow cones down the beach. And you're like, well, you know what? I guess I should. And you know what I mean? And that I've been there, where you're like, you know what? I should just go out, forget all this stuff, and just go get a job, doing whatever instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. We've all dealt with that kind of depression and that kind of wrestling within your mind, as you're an artistic person. I can only speak to my own experiences, but I know that to me is a lot worse than the fear of failure. The depression and the kind of, funk you get yourself into when you're not working. That freaks me out a lot more than just making a film and it's like, oh no, some people didn't like it. That's a lot more frightening. So, for me, it's never been really about failure. It's been, I just don't like those kind of periods where I'm not doing something because I feel like, okay, what's wrong? There has to be a reason, maybe it's outside of filmmaking, blah, blah, blah. But, I think keeping yourself busy and keeping yourself sane is the best way to do it. Because, you can get caught up in your head too easily. Especially these days, a lot of times, like, we spend so much time just staring at devices and, like kind of not actually engaging with the world around us. So you kind of end up in your head a lot more than you may otherwise. And, I think it's the best way to filter through that is to make work,
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of frustration for some people comes in, is that they can't, either they don't want to write because they think that if it's bad, it's going to be indicative of them, even if they write a script, and it's terrible. I've had to learn a very hard lesson, and I've had to learn this over and over again, and that is to stop trying to get perfectionism on the first draft.
Yeah.
It's like this weird thing with me, Evan. Like, I will outline, I will outline pages and pages and pages, and then I'm like, you know what? Maybe let me do something different. And I'm just like, it's almost like you're going in that hamster wheel, because you're always taking that first draft, and then you say, hey, no, I'm going to start draft 1-B, and then it's 1 draft C, and then, you know what I mean? And then you're still in that first draft instead of just getting something done and then trying to go back and trying to figure out what worked, what didn't work. And I think that's a lot of what holds people back.
Oh, absolutely. I would say I just wrote a pilot script, and it's a series that I'm going to attempt to work on here in Louisiana. And the guy I'm working on it with, we basically just said, like, let's get the vomit draft out, because we basically want to shoot this pilot on our own and have a, solid, cut pilot, everything like that, nice and done, to present to some investors to hopefully get funding for the rest of the season. And, for me, I was so worried about that because I'm like, man, there's a lot of people, there's eyes, there's people we're going to try to impress. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. And I'm just like, I'm only in stage 1 of the draft. I haven't even finished into edits yet. And we haven't even shot the film. We haven't even cut the film. So there's a lot more filters we're going to go through before this thing is seen by anyone. So, like, I think that's the thing. Everyone's thinking way too far ahead. And, like, I think everyone just needs to kind of chill out a little bit. And I know that sounds counterproductive, and I need to take my own advice sometimes. But, I think if you really get a little bit more relaxed with it, at least on your first draft. I'm not saying, like, don't work hard and don't outline and don't do this, because that's all very critical. I mean, pre-production is the key to being successful. But I think a lot of times not trying to be so hard on yourself with that first draft, because if you're so hard on yourself making that first draft that you never actually write it, it doesn't even matter,
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you completely, man. And it is getting that vomit draft out there. It is getting something on the page, because that's the thing. You get stuck in your own head, and you never sort of stop thinking in terms of what if, or it's what somebody once told me is called decision fatigue. You know what I mean? Where you sort of, you make so many decisions, and that's taking all your energy. You know what I mean? You're like, well, what if this happens? No. What if this happens and then this happens? And then you're sort of just caught in your own head of all these different options.
Decisiveness is really underrated these days, man. And it's hard to be decisive, I think, because there are so many options. I mean, like with film and not, and just in life. I mean, there are so many options with pretty much everything we do nowadays. Do I want to shoot it on the 60? Do I want to shoot it on 700 Mark II? Do I want to shoot it on the Alexa? I mean, like, so many options, but at the end of the day, it's just a damn camera. If that's what you're worried about, or, am I going to cast this person or that person if it's a micro budget? Well, at the end of the day, your actors are pretty much just a vessel that you're telling your story through. You're not dealing with, like, Brad Pitt or anyone, outrageously famous. So just make your stuff. I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, all these little decisions, they are important, but I think we as filmmakers really tend to kind of trivialize them and kind of really make them way more blown up than they have any business being. So, I mean, I think a lot of times just committing to something, and again, I mean, I'm guilty of it too. It's hard to be decisive sometimes, but I think just saying, okay, I'm writing 10 pages today, or I'm writing from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, not looking at my phone, I'm not going to check Twitter, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to, turn off the internet and just write. I mean, like, that's really underrated. And it's difficult, but, I think doing that and getting in a habit of kind of reprogramming your brain is really helpful to getting work done.
Yes. Yeah, getting that, just turning off all those distractions. And I think that is a thing too, man. Is the cell phone is like this sort of the double-edged sword. You can do so much with it, but there's also so many things vying for your attention. And what I find is when I'm going to write, I take the cell phone away and I just sit in front of my computer. I can turn off the internet through a number of different add-ons. Yeah. And you know what I mean? And I just work inside something like Open Office, which is free because it's open sourced, or even just Notepad or Fade In or Final Draft, and just that's it. Make a full screen mode and just write for 20 minutes and get into that habit. Because somebody once told me, I'm going to butcher this, but I think it's actions become habits, and then habits become what you're known for.
Oh yeah.
And I maybe I did butcher that. I'm not sure, but that's so true, And they're gonna say, hey, there's Evan. That's the guy who can write for 2 or 3 hours without looking at his phone. He's a freaking superstar because most people can't go 5 seconds without looking.
I don't know if I'm there yet, but I'm working on it. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's definitely hard to turn off those distractions.
Yeah, it really is. And, Evan, we've been talking for about, 48 minutes, and I just want to ask, before, we start wrapping up, I just want to ask about Son of Clowns. What was one of the biggest production issues that you had? I mean, whether it be a location or maybe you were going to film outside and a thunderstorm rolls in, what was one of the biggest production issues you ran in while making Son of Clowns?
I mean, kind of through just time. I mean, we shot this whole feature in 10 days, which was really a brutal schedule. A lot of times we would just hold ourselves up in a location for 3 days, do air mattresses, that whole thing, and just get it done. We didn't shoot 10 days straight, but we shot 10 days over the course of about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So, I mean, it was, 3 or 4 days straight, then a day or two off, and then right back at it, kind of so on and so forth. But I mean, aside from time, I mean, I think it was just trying to get conditions perfect, because a lot of this was, I mean, it's a narrative film, but we shot in the real world. There was no sound stages. There was no, roping off an entire area to make it quiet. I mean, a lot of times we'd have like giant trucks trying to come through. I remember we were filming in a parking lot for a scene, and like this 18-wheeler was trying to make a delivery, and then we had to like stop and wait for him. And then by the time he finished unloading his truck, like the sun was way different. The lighting looked, completely off. And, it's just trying to fix those things. And it's really easy in the moment to be like, we'll fix it in post. But it's just like, don't shoot yourself in the foot. But I mean, I actually, you mentioned the thunderstorm, a quick little story from set. There's a scene towards the end of the movie. I won't spoil it. But Jabari, who's Hudson's brother, Hudson's our main character in the film. Basically, they're mending kind of a soured relationship between the two of them. Something's gone wrong in a very big way. And basically, they're doing this scene where, they're trying to make amends, or Hudson's trying to make amends, and, Jabari's having none of it. And it's really this dramatic, tense moment. Like, I mean, they were both doing so good. You could cut the tension with, a pair of scissors. But out of nowhere, you just hear this giant thundercloud. And they stayed in character and just kept going. And then it slowly started raining a little bit. And then the light was all weird and wonky. But, we kept rolling. And that's the take we used. And so a lot of times when people watch the film, there's this, like, thunder in the background while they're having this argument. And a lot of people are like, did you add that? And I'm like, no, that's just from, like, the real world. So, I mean, it's like, it fit really well, I thought. And, like, it didn't come off as, like, corny or weird, because I mean, it didn't sound like an effect. I mean, it was just off in the distance and you could see it. So it was really cool. And it's just one of those situations where we wouldn't have got that from a sound stage. We wouldn't have got that from a whole bunch of like polished clean sets or anything. It's just shooting in the real world. That's what happens. So I mean, I think you do get happy accidents like that, but then at the same time you get the guy unloading the 18-wheeler. So that's a double-edged sword. So I think it's just a matter of like time and getting those locations to work for you instead of you working for your location. So,
yeah, it's amazing when you're out there actually filming all the things that can happen. And sort of some things can come together very well, and then some things like the use of the truck, the guy unloading the truck, and can sort of put a damper on things. And just some of the things that I found in hearing stories about filmmaking and, my own personal experiences, sometimes you just never know. I mean, for instance, I was going to film for 3 days out in this park, and I looked at the weather forecast and they said it was going to be beautiful. All 3 days, Evan, it stormed like crazy, and we were going to use zombies, and we couldn't put them out there because the zombie makeup was going to run.
Yeah.
So we ended up having to sort of do everything inside, and it looked completely different than what we wanted. It was just, we improvised as best we could, but it's always like, damn it, if only we could have done more outside. It's,
Yeah, I mean, filmmaking is just a big game of improvisation and trying to stay 2 steps ahead of the real world. And I mean, like, as filmmakers, we have a unhealthy habit of thinking the world's going to stop for us while we're on set. But, the world doesn't care. That guy, unloading his truck, he's just, doing his job. Like, he doesn't care that we're making a film. I mean, so it's like, that's what you deal with. It's going to rain or it's going to do this or that. And it's just a matter of being flexible. I mean, I think like being kind of zen about everything and really trying to, I guess be a little bit hippie with it and just try not to let every little thing bother you and just kind of be at peace. I mean, that's the key. Cause I mean, you have to be type A, I think, to make productions work. But I think if you can kind of take a little bit of a type B mindset when something goes wrong, you're going to save yourself a couple gray hairs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also meditation helps with that.
Yeah.
Just learning to roll with this. You'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
you know what? We'll figure this out. I'm going to become very David Lynchian about this.
Yes.
I'm going to, try.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I try to be. I mean, like Werner Herzog, he talks a lot about, just shooting guerrilla and like just the stuff that could go wrong and how you kind of incorporate that into your film and how that's actually part of your aesthetic. And like, I mean, I absolutely buy that. Cause I mean, a lot of our film was just guerrilla. I mean, it was just out there and, it was wild. And so, you deal with, the situations that come by just sticking a camera in the real world. And I think it gives your film a little bit of authenticity. I think that's actually really exciting, but I think at the same time it's also challenging. But once you capture it, it's almost like, hey, I got away with something. Hey, we did it. We, managed to film here, even though that guy unloaded his truck or whatever. And so you kind of walk away with a little bit of a, excited edge you may not have got if you just kind of rolled camera in a perfect little situation and everything, just, checked off the list.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true, Evan. Evan, just in closing, I wanted to ask, where can people check out Son of Clowns?
Yeah, so we are playing 2 more festivals at the moment. Like I said, we were just at Action on Film in Los Angeles, and we were at Yollywood Film Festival in Atlanta this past weekend. And we've got Queen City Film Festival in Maryland on the 6th, so it may not be this may not be out by then, but then we have Cucaloris Film Festival back home in North Carolina, and I am super excited for that film festival. That's one I've loved personally for a while, and so it's going to be a great homecoming for the film. And then actually the day after Cucaloris ends, this film, November 15th, is going to be streaming for Amazon Prime and Amazon Video on Demand. So November 15th is the day I think most people should remember, because you'll be able to check out Son of Clowns in full and stream it on Amazon.
And I will also link to all that in the show notes, everybody. And just in case they didn't get that, but again, it's at davebullis.com. Evan, where can people find you at online?
Yeah, I do Twitter probably the most. So if you do Twitter, twitter.com, my thing is at Mr. Evan Kidd. My work's also online, RockSetProductions.com. That's where I keep everything. And then obviously if you want to know more about Son of Clowns in particular, sonofclowns.com's got everything you need to know.
And again, everyone, I'll link to that in the show notes. And as Evan knows, I'm also most active on Twitter, and that's sort of where I meet a lot of people. Twitter has been an excellent networking tool for me.
Yeah,
I've been able to meet so many awesome people through there.
Definitely, yeah, I love Twitter. Twitter has put me in touch actually with a lot of people who I've ended up meeting in the real world. Like I stayed with my friend Blaze, who has a podcast called Us vs. Film, and we just met through Twitter. And he was gracious enough to put me up while I was in Los Angeles and really kind of show me around and do stuff like that. So, Twitter is definitely a wonderful network to meet people and kind of foster those filmmaking connections.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's like, I always say, social media is a tool, and it depends how you want to wield that tool. And Twitter is one that I have met so many people on there, Evan. I would say you and I met on there, but you actually, you and I met through email.
Yeah.
But
I saw you on Twitter. That's probably, I think, what it was.
There you go. All right. The Twitter is the, it's the actual source of all this.
Right.
Evan, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast of a conversation, dude. And, I wish you the best with Son of Clowns. And, if you ever want to come back, talk about, whatever else you're up to, about the TV pilot you talked about or whatever else, please, the door's always open.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Everyone, it's davebullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Again, you can go there for the show notes, and I will link to everything Evan and I discussed. Evan Kidd, I want to say thanks again, and I wish you the best of luck, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Take care, buddy.
Thanks.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.